Well, hello and welcome back to the Fairview Church podcast. Pastor Devin here, joining with Pastor Tyler, the gruesome twosome, here at it again.
Gruesome twosome.
I don't know, it just came to mind.
Okay.
You know, sometimes no filter here, it's fine. No, we're today we're talking about a very important topic. We're talking about the gathering. Our gathering on Sunday mornings. A lot of times, Pastor Tyler, we get to the Sunday morning and we execute. Now, there's a lot of planning and preparation that goes into that, but that's not the time that we have to really unpack some of the whys of the way we do things on a Sunday gathering. One of which, even as simple as that language, gathering. You may have noticed, Fairview family, that we've used a different term, this term gathering, as opposed to service. And any input on that or some why behind maybe that decision?
Yeah, well, we all know from it would be church, family, businesses, we all understand that words matter and that words are important and that words create culture. And so when it comes to the verbiage of service versus gathering, what we're trying to get after is that the gathering itself, not the service itself, but the gathering itself, the coming of the people together, that is the visible manifestation that is the local church.
Right.
So the gathering of the people, the brothers and sisters within the spiritual family, all coming together, all being together for the sake of what we're going to talk about, all of these elements of the worship gathering, that is the church, not the service. Mm-hmm. The service detail, if you will, like we're coming to engage or to watch a service be undone.
Right.
That's not what we're after. It is the gathering of the church, and that's the biblical. That's probably the term that fits what biblically the local church should be after.
Certainly, and it kind of a benefit, a side benefit of this change to our schedule we had back in January. We were in one gathering. It truly is a collection of Fairview Church in one gathering, one body. So that's a beautiful picture of the church in that moment that we can then gather to worship. And to do the things that we are called to do as a body.
Yep. You hear a lot of gathering, assembly, those type of things, and I think that term reflects biblical prescriptions probably a little bit better than its service does.
Yeah. So, church family, think on that, meditate on that. It's not for no reason; it's for a very well-intended reason, and so something to consider and think about for sure.
Yeah.
So, well, Pastor Tyler, let's dive in here, and I've got 6 pages worth of notes, so
sounds like my Sunday morning sermon.
Entirely possible I get lost at some point, and we'll get lost together.
Okay.
And so, where should we jump off into? I'm already lost.
Well, we are going to talk about the different elements, but we want to talk preparation first, correct?
Yeah. No, that's good, and thank you. I found my place now.
Page 1 of 6.
Absolutely.
Or page 4.
So we're talking about preparation, and what we're kind of refer back to this conversation we had with even Sid a couple weeks or last week.
Yes, and let's just talk about that for a second.
Yes.
We found out just before we came in here to record this episode that the previous episode to this episode was between me and you and Sid Cripps, one of our longtime members here at Fairview Church. That is, to our understanding now, the most tuned in, listened to episode to date.
Yep.
And we can't tell Sid that.
No, and he doesn't watch unless he's on it anyway, so he'll never hear this.
But it was a phenomenal episode.
It really was. And one of the points that we emphasized in that, and he had some great feedback and input on, is, the Sunday gathering, when we gather on Sunday mornings, really, it starts the night before, the Saturday before. It's all about the preparation and going into the Sunday morning gathering, and that can start the night before.
Yes. Yeah, I heard a pastor who has said this for many years. Sunday morning decision is or however you want to phrase it, Sunday morning attendance is a Saturday night decision.
Yeah.
And there's a preparation of that. There's a preparation in the aspect of praying. There's a preparation in being prepared to engage in worship, to participate in the elements that are coming, that we are calling are specific and good elements in our worship gathering. So there is a need to prepare oneself for what is coming and not just walk in last second, last minute and say, whoop, I'm here. Yeah. Now let's go.
Absolutely. And that speaks to kind of this thing that we're trying to lovingly disciple out of this more consumeristic mindset and approach to church. Experience-driven consumer models of church, it trains people to arrive and receive. Whereas we're trying to disciple our people towards a biblical model of worship where you prepare and you participate.
That's right.
And that starts not just on, it can be on the drive-in, but maybe even before. So, Pastor Todd, what are some of the ways we can encourage our people to intentionally prepare to come and to participate rather than just to come and to evaluate?
Yeah, I think for one is prayer. Pray before you ever even arrive. Pray for your participation specifically. Pray for the people who are going to be engaged in worship leadership that morning. So whether it be that be you, that be some of the instrumentalists, the singers, the band members. Pray for those who are serving behind the scenes. There are some of our serve team members that are working the computers, the sound equipment, those details. Pray for the partaking of the Lord's Supper if it's a Sunday that we do that, which is every first and third Sunday of every month. We also publicize the sermons, the text of the sermons of what's coming up in that actual month. So if you're hanging out, maybe put that publication in your Bible and pray for that text. Read over that text. Be prepared before even the preacher begins the preaching. Yeah,
no, that's great. There's this covenantal participation that we engage with as believers, as church members, as the body. And so it's really changing that posture even as we get to the end of the gathering, rather than asking the question, what did I get from today? Maybe reframe the question of, how did I engage today?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, preparation is important, but it's preparing for what is actually going to be happening in the gathering itself.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're talking about the things that we're doing, speaking against a consumeristic aspect, an experiential aspect. We're coming in as participators together. So then, I guess, why do we do what we do, and what does participation look like in those arenas? Okay, so let's just talk through some of the details.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, we of course start our gathering together with a call to worship.
Yes.
And so that is the centrality of the word, even in that moment, where we are starting off with the truth of Scripture to then to launch us into musical worship, typically on a Sunday morning.
Yeah. Well, I think, okay, so we've already talked about words. Here's another big word that we need to address just to make sure we frame the entire conversation well. It's the word worship.
Yeah.
Now, that's a word we all know.
It is.
We all understand worship, and quite honestly, believers and non-believers understand it because we all worship something or someone. We all have some aspect of worship in us. But when we're talking about the worship gathering, we are saying from start to conclusion, everything is under the category of worship.
Yeah.
Now, I'm gonna pick on your role a little bit because you've got this worship ministry title that often gets a focus solely on the singing and the music.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, if you just listen to everyday conversation around the church, you'll hear people talk about worship, and if you really dig into what they're saying, they're referring to the singing aspect.
Absolutely.
And sometimes then, this is where terms matter. This is where our conversations matter. If we say that worship is only the singing component in our gathering, we're actually missing out on what is also worship.
You're absolutely right. So a couple of thoughts there. First off, I'll take it to personnel. Maybe we need to change my title. Because, worship pastor is misleading.
Yes.
I think it's gotten somewhat better in the fact that I have oversight over the entire worship gathering and constructing it as a whole. Now, my primary duty on a Sunday morning is the leading of musical worship. So I guess go back to minister of music. I don't know. We could do that. But another point I want to make, just on what you had said, when we emphasize or see worship as only the musical worship portion, we start to see these other important things as interruptions to that. And please don't miss that. That is. I want to correct that. When we do our pastoral prayer moments, that is not an interruption to worship. It may be a change in our flow or a different aspect of worship that we are engaging with.
Right.
But it's certainly not an interruption.
No, it's a continuation.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And similar to when we go into the other very large portion of our gathering is the preaching of the word.
Right.
That is worship, to be sitting under preaching, under the authority of the word, standing as we read it, sitting under teaching, those sorts of things. That is other opportunity to be actively engaged with and participate with worship.
Yep. Ordinance is the same way.
Yeah.
Baptism, Lord's Supper, that's in the category of worship.
So for the musical portion of worship, want to get our terms correctly, it's easy to understand how to engage with that. You sing along. There are outward expressions that are at least they're expressions of worship. There are ways you're showing that engagement with that.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the time of the sermon, sitting under the teacher, you as a preacher, I'm going to lean on you because I don't do it quite as much. How would you encourage people to engage in worship while sitting under preaching?
Yeah. Okay. Can I go backwards one step?
Just this one time.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Grace one time. When we talk about worship, let's stay there big picture first, and then we'll narrow it down to the sermon and to some other elements. When we talk about worship, we know by definition that we're describing or prescribing worth to, for us, what we say in our Christian gathering of worship is to God the Father. So we are ascribing worth. We're saying that He is worthy above anything and anyone else, that He is worthy. And so our attention, our devotion is all going to Him. Mm-hmm. Okay, so when we start just thinking through then the worship gathering as a big picture whole, here's kind of how it was taught to me, and what comes to mind when I think through, when I'm either preparing, you and I are planning and preparing these details, but when I even am coming as a participant in these details, what should I be expecting to see or engage in? And this is where I have found this to be a very helpful guide. That when we as a church gather to worship, by definition of what worship is, there's a few things we know that is already, by Scripture's own testimony, that some things we know are already God-honoring and God-glorifying. For example, reading the Word. You already made mention of one, the call to worship. Mm-hmm. Some people think that's an old school statement of this is just how we begin. Well, absolutely it is, but it's not just the call to worship that matters, it's the reading of the Word. We know that the reading of the Word is honoring to the Father. Yeah. You've talked about musical worship. We've talked about that a little bit already, and there is singing the Word. Now, that is a greater conversation, but that's at least in its most basic element is that we are singing the Word. We know that the Word in musical shape and form is honoring and glorifying to the Father. Seeing the Word, now we're talking about ordinances, whether it be baptism or Lord's Supper. Right. Seeing the Word, praying the Word, and that we do that in multiple aspects, and sometimes it looks different from Sunday to Sunday, but we're praying the Word. We're praying what is good and honoring and glorifying to the Father. And then lastly, what you asked about, see what I did? I narrowed it back down. I brought it back.
Masterful. Good job.
Is preaching the Word.
Yeah.
Is preaching the Word. But you asked the question, how do people engage in the preaching? And I think it goes back to you speaking against a consumeristic, experiential, that we're not asking people to come and evaluate a service. We're asking people to come and participate in the worship gathering. So how do you do that in the preaching? Well, there's a couple of just no-brainer answers to it. One, you got to pay attention. Yeah. Don't tune out. If you're taking notes, don't start writing your grocery list that you're going to be making for later that day or later in the week. Don't. If you're on your phone, whether it be the Bible app, don't switch over to social media. Yeah. Don't respond to the text messages that just came through. Don't check your email. Those kind of things. You've got to pay attention. Got to pay attention. I think paying attention is a couple of things. One, it's investing in what the Word is saying that morning. Every text is a little different, and every Sunday is a little different. You've got to engage in the Word well and rightly. Secondly, I would say, listen to, and here's a big detail, listen to how the sermon is crafted that morning. Because here's what any preacher should be doing anytime they preach. They should be teaching you how you treat a text, not just learning from the text. It's a both and, though.
Sure.
But a preacher is showing you how to rightly handle the Word of God, what you can do with the text versus even what you can't do with the text. So the crafting of the sermon becomes important because you're realizing and seeing not every text is able to be crafted the same way.
Yeah.
There's a craft in the allowance of what the text is teaching. And so you've got to pay attention. Listen for the crafting. Listen sometimes for the verbal outline of the text or the progressional flow the preacher takes with the text. All that should be very purposeful by the preacher. And then you're asking a couple of questions now that start to get a little bit more personalized. But before getting too individualized, we're asking the question, what am I learning about God in this text?
Yeah.
And I think that's an important starting point because we often ask the question, well, what does this mean to me? Okay, that's a fair question to ask, but it should not be the first question we ask.
Right.
That's a consumeristic mentality if it's directed all for me. But a good preacher will have personal application.
Absolutely.
But before personal application often comes good theology. For the only time we can get to proper application is if we understand what the text is teaching about God. We only understand our lives when we first see who God is correctly. And so that's what you're engaging. You're like, what are those nuggets of truth? What are those teaching moments that may be presenting a bigger picture for me, but is going to conclude in personal application? What does my walk look like this upcoming week? What is a challenge that I need to listen, heed, and learn from? Where's the wisdom for my daily life in the preacher's sermon from the text?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to show. That's what when you preach too, you're trying to show. We're only speaking authority from the text because of the text. It's not our opinions,
Right.
not our thoughts about the text. It is, this is what the text says, and therefore this is what it means, either for theology, for bigger picture things other than ourselves, but also for ourselves.
Yeah. No, that's really good. That's helpful. Now, I know typically in the flow of our current, it is a liturgy. The order of a gathering is liturgical.
Yep.
Typically following the preaching of the word is, we usually have some sort of response. You made mention we observe the Lord's Supper, the ordinances on the first and third Sundays of the month. And that's the seeing, you said, of the word. You're seeing a visible reflection or a symbolization of the gospel.
Yes.
And I think that's so important that speaks back to the preparation piece. And I want to share this story because it emphasizes the point. Not at all is it intended to exalt myself in any way. I was in conflict with someone this one particular week to a point that I know out of anger with that individual, I was in sin. And I knew coming up that Sunday, we were going to observe the Lord's Supper.
Yes.
And I took very seriously the fact, if I don't address this, I cannot approach the Lord's table in a worthy manner. Yeah. We talk about that from the platform, trying to teach our people. And so with that, knowing that was coming and knowing there was some business to be dealt with, I dealt with it. I called, I confessed, I asked for forgiveness.
Yeah.
And there was... Yes, the initial prompting was so that I might receive the supper in a worthy manner, but it restored a relationship.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And allowed progress forward between a brother, progress in that relationship.
Right.
And so I guess the point I'm trying to make is wanting to both recognize the value and importance of the ordinances of the Lord's Supper.
Yes.
Seeing that as an opportunity for confession, reconciliation, and also maybe, Tyler, to normalize the potential of abstaining when necessary.
Absolutely, because I was about to say, if you didn't have a chance to connect with that brother and resolve some things, then you would have in your spirit not been in a state that you should have taken the Lord's Supper, and abstaining would have been very healthy.
Yes.
I mean, Paul makes very clear to the church in Corinth that there's significant judgment that can come upon taking of the Lord's Supper in an inappropriate, incorrect manner.
Exactly.
And so, that must be said, I think, even more clearly sometimes. There is a need at times to abstain.
Yeah.
And not just make it an ordinary practice, but the purpose behind the Lord's Supper is to remind us, on however often of a basis we do it, that the gospel is real, and the gospel is for us, and the gospel is in us, and the gospel is continuously working through us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's good.
And that speaks to this. I don't think this is in our notes, but we're going to go there. The issue of frequency of when we take and observe the Lord's Supper. If we're normalizing, people abstaining, we want to give them opportunity once they've done the business that's necessary to then come back in to take the supper in a worthy manner, in a restorative manner. And so if we only do that once a quarter, it's a long time. You got to wait for the next bus to catch the Lord's Supper.
Absolutely.
Whereas, I would be a fan of doing it every week personally, but, that's just another topic for another day.
Yeah, and this is where we find Scripture not necessarily prescribing anything specific for us. And so this becomes a local church issue. This becomes a Christian liberty, Christian freedom issue that a local church can say, hey, if we want to do it on a weekly basis, we're perfectly okay in doing it on a weekly basis. If we want to do it every first and third Sunday, we can do that too. If you want to do it every quarter, you can do that. Just personally wouldn't advise against it. And I think here's where it's important that we come back to conversations we've had about other topics is we need to land our convictions somewhere.
Yeah.
The frequency of the Lord's Supper, this doesn't have to be a conviction that everyone in the church agrees with, but as worship leaders, that's who we are as pastors. We at least have to land our convictions somewhere on that.
Yeah.
And so frequency in those details does matter. And I point out, because your story was phenomenal, I want to point out this one detail. Well, let me clarify. When I say phenomenal, it was a good testimony.
Understand.
You confess that you're a sinner like us all, and
Absolutely.
so we needed to hear that. But how I was raised often when it came to the Lord's Supper is, and I think this is sometimes ingrained to people who've been in the church for a long time, that when you come to the Lord's Supper, there's usually this moment of, I need to prepare for the Lord's Supper. Mm-hmm. And here's what, speaking of convictions, here's what hit me one day as a young adult. I can't truly prepare for the Lord's Supper 30 seconds before I take it.
That's a good point.
And if I do, I'm probably not preparing well.
Yeah.
And so there has to be a moment of preparation even before. And if I'm treating the Lord's Supper that way, that I need true preparation before I even get to the worship gathering to partake, I probably need to treat all my worship that way.
Yeah.
And that goes back to the preparation aspect of things, making sure I'm ready to participate. And if I've got lingering sin or unconfessed sin, then I need to make sure I handle those details before I attempt to worship.
I think that's a great point. Overall, just an elevating in our own hearts and minds what we are doing when we gather.
Yes. Yeah, sure. I know from preaching now for years, I can't put my finger on some theological reasoning behind this, but I can put my finger on very, very functional experiences with this detail. When there are people who have unconfessed sins, or there are people who are struggling in their engagement to worship, in their participation of things, especially while I'm preaching, because I'm just up there looking at the people for quite a time, you can almost see that sometimes on the facial expressions or the body language of people. Some people are able, and it's week to week, some people are able to engage the word really well. And there has to be, in some aspect, a component of a pure heart. And then some people that may be struggling or may have unconfessed sin, you can see sometimes their spirit struggling. Yeah. And it may have nothing to do with the word. It may have nothing to do with anything that's bad. It may just be the Holy Spirit doing a work in them. And you can see facial expressions. You can see engagement. Just like you can music. Hey, for some people, music and singing is a thrill.
Yeah.
And they are that's what they come. They're like, this is what I'm looking forward to. And I'm like, that's cool. And for some people, the musical worship is not as thrilling. And that's okay too.
Yeah.
But regardless of how music plays in you individually, you're still engaging and participating in those elements of worship as well as possible for how you're wired, because again, it's not about you, it's about the one you are worshiping.
Yeah.
So that's helpful, I think.
That's a very helpful distinctive for sure. Again, Pastor Tyler, I've lost my.
I don't think we're anywhere near what what our notes.
I don't think so either. So I am certainly out of ideas, but I did want to give opportunity if you had anything else lingering that you wanted to address from this topic today that we didn't.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably lots of different things that we could talk about. I think that. One, for example, is we've talked about our liturgy a little bit. Yeah. We've talked about things that we do at Fairview Church, and that's good. Even at Fairview Church, and I want to talk about it from an internal perspective and then from an external perspective. Even at Fairview Church, the things we do and the things that may be normal rhythms and routines at Fairview Church, we may be convictional over these things that we do, but there's also some freedom in what they look like from week to week.
Sure.
You had mentioned earlier the pastoral prayer. That's one thing that, for me, I think when a local church gathers, that the local church should be about the praying together.
Yeah.
But as excuse me, I can't even speak. As has been demonstrated, that the topic of prayer can be different every week.
Sure.
The focus of prayer can be different every week. It could be a prayer of confession one day. It can be a prayer of intercession on another Sunday. It can be a prayer of blessing. We may highlight ministries and pray over ministries. We may commission teams that are going on mission. We may have different areas of focus, and I think that's what's beautiful, is there's freedom in those details.
Yeah.
Just like if you, as a member of Fairview, find yourself on vacation or somewhere else, and you're at another church on a random Sunday, and their liturgy is different. Mm-hmm. Their flow's different. Their aspects of what worship looks like is different. And there's freedom in that. That's not a bad thing necessarily or a good thing. You can still worship
absolutely
when the liturgy is different. And I think that's helpful just to have a reminder of that there's freedom there.
Absolutely, there's freedom there, and I think it's healthy. Granted, we don't get a lot of opportunity to check out other churches.
No.
But for the member, for the folks out there, kind of a good test of proper conviction this way, having freedom of liturgy, those sorts of things, and still being able to approach things worshipfully and intentionally. Try a more high church worship experience, because that's gonna challenge you, because there are some churches that are way farther down on the emotive scale of expression of worship, but
yes,
you can still have meaningful engagement with the Father through worship, through those more high church liturgical moments.
And just real quick, defining high church, low church type. In high church, you're talking that the outline of the gathering is very scripted.
Yes.
And I say scripted on purpose. It may even be printed in the bulletin when you arrive. There's going to be very clear times that this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it, and they're going to walk you through those times.
Absolutely.
And then there would be kind of low church. It's not high versus low as in, importance.
Right, importance.
It's just the stylistic aspect of things. Low church would be, there almost seems like there's no organizational flow, but it just all came together at the end of the day. But we know that's not the case either.
Sure. No, that's a good distinction to make for sure. So, well, I think this has been great. It's always fun to talk shop, but it's so much bigger than that. It's not just shop.
Yep.
We hope Fairview family, that's been an insight kind of into our minds. We're doing things on purpose and with great intentionality. It's not by happenstance. Of course, if you have questions about these things, we'd love to engage. This is what we love to talk about because we love to lead you in this. We just don't always have a chance on Sunday mornings to unpack the whys behind the execution. So hopefully this was some insight there. With that, we hope you do have a wonderful rest of the week. Please like, subscribe wherever you're watching and listening, all those fun details. If you're bored, go listen to Sid's podcast from last week. It's a hoot and a holler for sure. But anyway, we hope that you are well. Have a great week, and we'll see you Sunday.